Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video I would like to discuss a way of looking at the way the brain develops and how we see a person's emotional intelligence in relative perspective to their logical intelligence. And both in themselves can be seen through the point of physical adaptation. According to the stimulus an individual receives since the point they are then brought up. And from the point of adaptation, you can actively see the nucleation point at which the consciousness or the intelligence began developing in the brain. The point of nucleation would essentially create what is known as the generation of gray matter in that particular region within the brain. So now when you're looking at an individual with a lot of emotional intelligence, you would see in the prefrontal lobe, in the frontal cortex of the forehead of the brain, this section of the brain, you would see a larger formation of gray matter within this particular cortex, which the gray matter, in essence, from the nucleation point, creates a hollow chamber. Gray matter, which in itself is of a different structure than white matter, which is where the generation of the storing of that information relays, and from the white matter you then apply it into what is known as intelligence, the ability to critically apply that particular intelligence is as a result of gray matter development within those cortexes. Now, in the logical perspective of things, in logical intelligence, you would see that the peripheral cortexes have received a nucleation point where you then see gray matter, which caused at a nucleation point the densening of that particular region of the brain, resulting in a hollow-like structure known as gray matter, where the intelligence of that particular person resonates more within the brain's regions. It is where they then process the way they analyze their environment. And we can tell based on these two different regions of the brain the different personalities a person would have. More empathetic people would have a more frontal developed gray matter within their brain, and narcissistic people or logical people would have a more peripheral development within their brain of gray matter. Now, when you look further into the development of gray matter, we have to find the point at which you stimulate the generation of gray matter, which is the nucleation point. And the nucleation point is caused by the stimulus from the environment, which in itself, the more you stimulate that particular region of the brain, the more the nucleation or the formulation of gray matter pursues and continues to create a more hollow-like structure. In the gray matter now, in the nucleation, you could see that if I was to stimulate an individual or a child in a negatively impactful emotional way since the beginning of their childhood, the gray matter formation would not take place, and as a result, it would result in a stunting of that gray matter formation. Imagine now if the gray matter formation is as a result of a means of disciplinary action, which now results in the child having to either react emotionally or logically based on the discipline it is meant to choose its road forward. If it responds emotionally, you could say that the child is going to have a bit more of a stronger emotional experience in their life going forward if the pathway continues in the development going on. But now if a child reacts logically in the processing of its information and based on its processing, and you can see the differentials in these individuals. I am a more peripheral developed individual, but that is also as a result of a particular treatment, which I will dive into in a second. In the action of developing gray matter, if it is based upon the disciplinary action, which causes the development of the young individual to either react emotionally or logically. Whichever regions of the brain it learns to create its more powerful resonance towards is what they're going to end up developing more in their skills. And in logical, you might find things such as coordination, whereas within emotional, you might find such a thing as love. And in these different emotional cortexes are different patterns. Because in coordination being a physical ability, you might say, well, what would that correlate with? Well, in the coordination of your emotions, you also learn to regulate them from a logical perspective rather than the emotional. Now I'm getting into the logical way of analyzing the emotional. But in order for the emotional to learn to analyze the logical, you must look at it from an emotional perspective, which arises at the question, not in why, but in how. If I ask why, I'm awaiting somebody else to answer that question. If I ask myself how, out of the emotion that I feel, how is this like that? Well, then you might find you give yourself a logical explanation. And in this correlation, you might find that the